Well, good evening, everyone. Nice to be with you. I know that we're in the midst of the Being with Dying program, and so I want to address the people who are in the room who are participants in that program, but also hopefully this will be of some benefit to others who may be watching online or through YouTube. So tonight, I wanted to try and focus on what I think of as the possibility of forgiveness. And I really want to emphasize that word, the possibility of forgiveness. For many people, perhaps a number of us here on this call, forgiveness has its, as a quality, has its roots in mostly a Judeo-Christian tradition. And our understanding of forgiveness springs from those traditions. And even if that was not our faith tradition, teachings on forgiveness have permeated life in European cultures, certainly Western cultures, and also other cultures who have been influenced by the zeal of missionary efforts. So it shows up in families and as a cultural value, often with the accompanying moral standard that we should forgive. So to me, forgiveness is sometimes confusing because it's associated with this magnanimous generosity, with spiritual growth, religiosity, but also with superiority and even self-righteousness. So I think it remains a kind of thorny issue from a psychological point of view anyway. There's been lots of positive research, of course, on the health and relational benefits of forgiveness. But also there are some psychological models that are focused on assessing the value of forgiveness. And that assessment's often, well, it's often framed in a model of profit and loss. It's the intentional decision to let go of resentment, of anger, which can function, at least in those models, as a retaliatory deterrence, even if it doesn't guarantee that the aggressor will change their behavior. Now, personally, I think of it as a practice of fierce self-compassion, and one that needs to be divorced, at least in my mind, from notions of outcome and changing the other. And from this perspective, anyway, we could see that all forgiveness is essentially self-forgiveness. It's a kind of relative practice that introduces us or helps us to recognize and understand an ultimate truth. It's a practice that helps us not to turn away. And in my life, it's been a fairly constant companion, a path of healing, a way to discover how it's possible to meet unapproachable suffering with awareness, with an awareness that's infused with mercy. Several of us here, I think, just returned from a pilgrimage in Japan led by Roshi and Kaz Tanahashi. And while I was there, I was reminded of the Ama. The Ama were a collection of Japanese women pearl divers, days gone by, and they were strong women. With no scuba tanks and bare-breasted, they arrived at the shore in a loincloth and swam out into the sea. And then they dove down beneath into the dark waters. They were free divers, actually. And they slipped below the surface, and they often emerged several minutes later with a basket of oysters. And within each of those oysters, there was a pearl. And for me, this is a beautiful metaphor of what happens when we dive deep into our wounds, often returning to the surface of our lives, if you will, with a precious gift. One that, well, in addition to contributing to our own healing, helps us resonate, we could say, with the suffering of others who have similar wounds. And when we do this, I think we have the potential to become wounded healers. And when we don't heal our wounds, well, we keep on wounding others. So forgiveness is a beginning of a process that heals a life characterized by separation. It opens the mind and the innate compassion of the heart. The image that's often used in talking about this subject is the releasing of a hot coal. That we've been holding a hot coal in our clenched fist, some pain that we've been carrying for 20, 30, 40 years. And the forgiveness is the releasing of that and setting down old pain. A way of healing what divides us. Releases the fear and the resentment that lives in our hearts, that keeps us separate from ourselves, others, and life itself. I remember once meeting the great humanistic psychotherapist Rogers, Carl Rogers. He was the grandfather of a friend of mine, and we had a preschool together, and Carl used to come and play in the sandbox with the kids. And later I studied his films and watched him working with his patients, his clients. And he rarely spoke, but his listening was so devout that it would draw out the truth from the clients he was serving. It was like his listening was a healing salve. And there's a quote of his that I've carried around for years. I emailed it to Noah, and maybe Noah can post it in the chat. And it goes something like this. I'm going to paraphrase, but he says, "Before every session, I take a moment to remember my humanity. That there is no experience that this woman, this man has had that I cannot share with them. No fear I cannot understand. No suffering I cannot care about. Because I too am human. And no matter how deep their wound, they do not need to be ashamed of it in front of me. I too am vulnerable. And because of this, I am enough. And whatever their story, they no longer need to be alone with it. And this is what will allow the healing to begin." Sharing our stories, we all know, can help us to heal. I remember that the very first patient we ever served at the Zen hospice, while we didn't have a hospice, we were taking care of people at the San Francisco Zen Center. Anyway, there was this woman, Stella, and she said to me Frank, some of the volunteers that come in this room, they tell me I should let go. And others of them, well, they tell me I should love. Frank, what should I do first? I said, oh, Stella, I don't know, but I think you'll know, and she did ultimately. In my life, love is the lubricant that allows us to let go, to discover some kind of freedom. And the freedom I'm talking about here, I mean something very practical and immediate. I mean freedom from indictments and recriminations and judgments that cause us so much suffering. Holding on to our pain is quite simply not in our best interest. I don't know. It seems to me that our lack of forgiveness can have an enormous power over us, to hold us back and keep us from fully experiencing our lives. I don't know about you, but there are times in my life when I'm very loyal to my suffering. But we don't have to let our old hurts, continue to define who we are. We can let the past dissolve. We can leave it behind. Now, while a whole lifetime can be released in a moment, for most of us anyway, the process of forgiveness is it's a gradual awakening. Yeah. And the people I've worked with at the end of their lives, I'd say about 98% of them, for all of those people, there was some value in forgiveness. You can't tell people they need to forgive, but people come to it in their own way. And sometimes that forgiveness is waylaid by the circumstances surrounding the wounds or the harm that's been caused to them, or they've caused to themselves, or their relationship to the perpetrator, or the lack of time, or how old the wound is. There was a woman I remember at our hospice. I met her in Golden Gate Park in the bushes. She was living in the bushes. And she had a very serious cancer, and she was from Southeast Asia, and her family had abandoned her. They felt ashamed of her illness. And the man she was living with kind of pushed her out, and so she was living in the park. And they said, well, come live with us. And she came to the hospice and stayed with us. And I remember talking to her about forgiveness, and I shared with her this image that's often given of dropping a hot coal, releasing our old pain, And she said, I never thought about releasing old pain. And I said, well, what did you think about? And she said, oh, I just wondered if it was possible for me to love again. And she said, I realized if I carried that much hate in my heart for others or for myself, I couldn't love again. And that was the most important thing to me. I think for a lot of us, we get to some place of forgiveness when we realize that we don't want this to interfere with our capacity to love. We don't want it to be the legacy we leave behind for our children. We forgive because, well, I don't want to reach the end of my life and have it be full of sighs and argument. So we all want to be free, right? Most of us anyway. Many of us at least believe that it's an essential step, right, on the road to freedom. It's good for us, right? So how come we don't do it? What is it that gets in the way? What are the prohibitions we have for forgiveness, or the things we think need to be met before we can forgive? What are those stories we carry? I actually want to hear from some of the people in the room rather than just talking about this. So if Noah, if we can, or someone can get a mic to some people, I'd like to just know from a few of you in the room, just raise your hand and they'll get you a mic. What is it that stands in the way between you and self-forgiveness, or you and the forgiveness of another? What gets in the way? What's the things that we forget? Like for example, we confuse forgiving with forgetting. We're afraid that if we forgive, we'll forget, and the harm that's been done to us, or the harm that we've been done to others or to ourselves, it'll happen again. But we don't need all the physical holding and the emotional tension to remember the lessons that we've learned. So what gets in the way? Let's just be honest with each other. We'll put aside the normal Dharma talk format, and we'll just have a dialogue with each other a little bit. What gets in the way? What stops you from forgiving? Let's be real with each other, okay? Because you're here for a Being with Dying program. It's a good place to practice being real. So what gets in the way? I can't see everyone, Noah, so
There's one on online, fear of being hurt again.
Fear of being hurt again, sure. We fear that if we forgive, we might get hurt again. We're afraid that we'll forget. Beautiful. All right, some people in the room. I want to know what gets in the way. What stops you from forgiving? Raise your hand. Somebody will get you a mic. Just
Hi, Frank.
Hi.
Mind for me is this identification with feeling aggrieved, victim, identity of the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So some self-identity that we use to sustain our lack of forgiveness, right? We define ourselves by that old hurt, often for years, decades.
Hello. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just that we get wedded to our position, right? And we don't know who we'd be without that identity. There we go. That camera helps a lot. Okay, someone else started to speak and I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Stand up.
If you're willing, and if you're even willing to say your first name, that'd be great.
I think a misunderstanding of where power comes from, and fantasies about getting power back.
Ah, okay. That's a good one. Could you say more about that? That's a really good one. Thank you for your honesty. Yeah. Power is a big piece in this. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagining that when you felt powerless, the person on the other side of that felt powerful and like
Yeah.
wanted to be that person and not the person that you are.
So I'm not going to forgive. I'm going to hold on to this pain for 40 years, right? So that
Well,
I have
it's
power over.
it's
Go
like
ahead.
playing out something in your head over and over again, playing out scenarios where the dynamic is switched and
Right.
giving your power to that fantasy.
Yeah. So have you experienced those tape loops? Things you wish you could have said then, or that you'd want to be able to say now?
Yes.
Yeah. I have to. Wishing I was wiser in the moment, more strong in the moment, less, less a victim in the moment. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. What else stands in the way? Somebody else willing to say?
Hi, Frank. My name is Bethany.
Hi, Bethany.
So I want to forgive, and I'm not sure how to let the pain go.
Yeah. Well, what's been your experience, Bethany, with other pains in your life? What's helped?
Time.
What's helped?
Time, the passing of
Time alone. Yeah, but time alone doesn't do it, right? It takes attention and time. It takes some loving attention and time. Because time just goes by and doesn't necessarily heal anything. Yeah. So some intention to let go and a willingness to bring mercy, to infuse our awareness with some degree of mercy, that helps. Yeah. It doesn't mean we justify the harm that was done to us or that we did to ourselves. That's not what forgiveness is. Yeah. So I'm curious, just as I say those few words, how does that land for you, Bethany?
Yes, I can see that, that having the intention to forgive would certainly be an important component of that.
Okay. All right. Let's pretend, okay? Let's pretend now that you have the intention. You might even. What comes next?
I would like to forgive. I will forgive.
All right.
Maybe I speak the thing that I'm forgiving for. Speak it aloud.
Yeah.
Power
Okay. Yeah.
instead of inside me.
Beautiful. So there's something that you're inclining us toward, Bethany, which I think is important. It's the willingness to see what hurts.
Yes.
I mean, it really is, right? It's the willingness to see how come we're suffering. What is it that actually hurts? And to go toward that experience that we want to run the other way away from, right? Or that we've tried to bury for decades or pretend isn't there. So to go toward that hurt, to be willing to feel it, with some degree of mercy and kindness. So it's not just an awareness of, well, this is the hurt, or just replaying the content of the story. It's a willingness to meet what seems unapproachable with some degree of tenderness, with some degree of love, not to justify. It's not justifying the actions. It's the willingness to meet our own pain with some degree of mercy. So even as I say that, what happens?
That's it. That's the key.
That's the key. Okay. So you can see in this case, and I'm not trying to prove a point, but to me anyway, this is why I think of all forgiveness ultimately as self-forgiveness. Even if I'm attempting to reach out to and forgive someone who's done me harm. It's the willingness to touch that pain with some degree of self-awareness and loving attention, mercy. Yeah. But I don't think of this as a Hallmark card. This is fierce. This is really hard. There are things in my life, things that have been done to me by others, or things that I've done to myself that I think, oh, that's going to be impossible. That's going to be impossible. But it's not. And sometimes I say I forgive you in a meditation practice. Maybe I put a photo of that person on my altar, or if it's me, I put a photo of me on the altar, and I begin to find whatever phrases work for me, just as you should find the ones that work for you. And if I say I forgive you, it doesn't sound real. And so I don't stop. I keep going. I keep working with that phrase. And sometimes it's taken me years to work with that phrase. Years. Are you up for that?
I will certainly try. Thank you so much for your insight.
Yeah, you're welcome. I worked in refugee camps in southern Mexico with Central American refugees, many of which came from Guatemala. And then I went into Guatemala and was up in the north, Nava and Chahu. And there things were under, what do you call it? When they don't let you go out at night, I forget what it's called, curfew. And there was a general who flew me in his helicopter the day before to show me all the good things that the Guatemalan army was doing to help the people of Guatemala. And it was a lie. But I went. And in that particular town, there was a little tiny clinic, a little medical clinic that some of you as physicians can relate to. There was no doctor there. There was just a medical student and shelves of medications that were well past their expiration date that had been donated by an evangelical organization in the United States. And I spent the evening in there with that young medical student, and into the clinic came a young woman, a 7-year-old, I don't know, really young, and carried by her father, and mother was there, and they didn't speak Spanish. They only spoke sect of a kind of Mayan dialect. And anyway, this girl was in gut-wrenching pain, and it was probable that she had a ruptured appendix, and that she'd been suffering for days. And so it was clear that she needed a surgery. So I went to this general who'd flown me in a helicopter, knowing this little girl could never get to a hospital in time. It would be 5 hours by jeep to get her to a place where she could have surgery. So I went to this general's home and I knocked on his door, and I explained the situation, and expecting he would help and respond to this little girl. And he said, "So indígenas, they're Indians, they're less than human." And then he slammed the door. And I went back to be with this little girl, and father thought I was a doctor, and so I held her head, I remember, and showed him how to hold her head. And her mother gave her this kind of homebrew corn mash, and they rocked her. And that little girl died a horrible death that night, a horrible death. And when I got home, I worked to educate senators and Congress people about the wars in Central America, and I had a lot of anger. And one day, my son, who was now 3 or 4 years old, was there with me in my house, and I was listening to the radio, and the radio was a government official, I think it was Reagan, who was talking about all the good things America was doing in Central America, and I started to scream at the radio. I was so furious. So furious. And then I saw my son in the corner, cowering with his hands over his head. And I thought, I got to stop the war. Not the war in Central America, the war in my own heart and mind. And so I put photos of Guatemalan soldiers on my altar, and I began to work with them. It took years for me to honestly find some forgiveness for their ignorance, not for their actions. And then it took me another year to forgive myself for what I wanted to do to this general. Yeah. Sometimes it's our wish for vengeance that stands in the way of our forgiveness. Or the wish for justice. Forgiveness isn't about justice. No justice came in that situation I just described. Okay, what else gets in your way? People in the room, what else gets in your way? Let's be real. What stands between you and forgiveness sometimes? I can't see.
Hi,
Hi. Tell me your first name.
I'm Leah.
Hi, Leah.
Hi.
Thanks for your bravery in speaking. Yeah.
I have a family member in my life, and I've really spent my entire life trying to, working with I'm working 2 programs with them. One is where I go into the relationship and I have forgiven them and I feel so good about myself, and aren't I awesome?
Mm.
And and I can actually, I can go with that and it doesn't feel the worst. And then because they simply can't help who they are, they will hurt me again the exact same way over and over and over again. And I'm not needing to rupture this relationship. I want to see it through. They'll die before I will, and then I'll get to have more time to work on it. But I experience that it's like a transactional piece. I have never been truly given an apology. I've been given nice words. It's so lovely that you still want to connect after everything that happened.
Mm.
I say, yes, aren't I great for that? And I'm so high and mighty. And then zing, get you again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to be careful here.
Mm.
First of all, I don't think you're high and mighty.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're trying
Yeah.
as best as you can. I trust that in you. Yeah. And forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that we'll ever even want to see those people again. In your case, you do want to see them. And there might be a reconciliation that can happen in your own heart.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you may never hear those words from the other people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't do it for them. And you're not doing it to wait for some acknowledgement from them either. You do it because it hurts too much to carry this around in your heart. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't keep appropriate boundaries, and that, you've been studying moral suffering here, I understand. Mm-hmm. And so we're not wanting to contribute to that more.
Yeah.
But I do it because it hurts me too much. It hurts too much to carry this around in my heart.
Yeah.
So I do it. I did it with my own parents. I've done it with my abusers. I've worked on it, and it's been fierce. It is not a Hallmark card.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't deliver you the things that you think you want or deserve.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
Yeah. You have the strength to do that. I sense that in you. Just your willingness to speak to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
It takes strength to change old habits, old ways of being. Someone else is willing to speak in the room? This is good. This is real. Okay, there's somebody right there in the front row, I think. Oh, there. Okay. Hi, tell me your first name. Oh, I don't have her sound.
Hi, could you hear me?
Hi, there you are. Hi.
I'm Danping. To answer your question, my initial thought was the pursuit of justice will get in the way because I always find it difficult to distinguish justice from vengeance, exactly as the way you described it. But instead of pursuing that thought, I wonder if I can ask you a question about
Sure.
your experience of forgiveness. What does it feel like for you after you forgive the general? Does the color of your memory change? What is function of forgiveness there?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to speculate. No, keep in mind. I'm going to speculate that you have part of the answer. But I'll share my side, okay? For me, when I think of that person, if it's been someone who's harmed me, I don't necessarily, ultimately I see them with more compassion, but on the process I don't. In the process, I recognize something in them that lives in me. Their ignorance, for example, that would lead them to those actions. And it helps when I can also see that ignorance in me, not necessarily the very same ignorance, but the quality of ignorance in me. Then it allows me to build an empathetic bridge to their experience. And so it humanizes them. That's the first thing it does, is it humanizes them. Where I've kept them in a box of nothing more than an aggressor, a transgressor. it humanizes them. That's the first thing that I notice, yeah? And with that humanizing comes some softening, you know, some recognition of our common human dilemma, you know, and the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion, or I call them demand, defend, distract, yeah? And then I know I'm on my way. It's not the end, but I know I'm on my way. Then when someone is human, something's possible that wasn't possible when I saw them only as a transgressor, just as when they saw me only as an object. They could do things to me that were horrible. I don't want to be that person who can do things to someone, including hold them out of my heart. How does that land for you? I'm curious.
Thank you for all the humanization and softness. When you talk about, it reminds me of this interconnection that we always talk about in Buddhism.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about your comment in relation to the gentle lady. Talk about the victimhood a moment ago, because when there is harm or there's evil in the world, I think it's really easy to consider myself only as the victim or as the innocent person who's suffering. But those criminals or those who committed great evils, they also suffer.
Yes.
And it's quite easy to excuse myself of the responsibilities on behalf of the one who are committing evil.
Yeah.
And that's something you just reminded all of us to do. So thank you.
Well, that's a beautiful, humble recognition that you and I and everyone in this room and on this call are subject to causes and conditions. We are, it's not just some notion of inseparability that we're speaking to here. We are recognizing our common ground with each other. And that's part of what joins us. You know, His Holiness went to Auschwitz-Birkenau and spoke there. And he said something that really just knocked my socks off. He said, "I'm so glad I wasn't born to be a guard in this camp. I don't know what I would have done. You know, had I been brought up with those causes and conditions, had I been given this job, who knows what I would have done." You know, and I thought this was a remarkably humble statement by the being that is said to be the embodiment of compassion. I thought that was real. Yeah. Okay, there's somebody else who wants to speak. And Noah, you have to keep me on time. You know, I can't follow it. Who was it that had the microphone?
How do you deal, this is my name is Carolyn. How do you deal with self-compassion?
How do I feel it?
How do you work with self?
Okay. Well, the first. Okay, wonderful. So no, keep the mic. Keep the mic. There you go. I'm going to ask you a question, if I may, Karen. How do you? What's it like when you extend your compassion to someone else? You do that in your work, I'm sure.
Warm.
Yeah. What was it like?
Feels warm and connected.
Warm and connected. Okay. What else, Karen? Hold your mic up a little higher so I can hear you.
For me, it feels plugged in to something bigger and better than myself.
Beautiful. So there's some sense of you, but there's also some sense of you being included in something that's larger than you. So you don't disappear. There's something larger than context, let's call it, or some quality of being, let's call it. You know, some aspect of yourself that you can kind of lean into. Yeah. So without naming that larger context, for some people it's religion, for some people it's time and nature, you know, that connects them with that, right? Beautiful. Can you say what it is for you? connects you to that?
I, to be honest, don't have any idea. I
Okay.
don't know. I haven't been able to put words to it. I just know it when I feel it.
All
I've
right.
lately labeled it the universe, but I don't know what else.
Fine. That's a perfectly good name for it. Yeah. I mean, some people will name it the ground of being or Christ or lots of names, right? You call it the universe, that's just fine, right? And when you are that, when you're Karen in the midst of the universe, you have the universe has got your back, let's say, okay? Then something's possible. And you're able to extend your forgiveness to this other person. And when you feel it, it feels warm. Yeah, you mentioned being warm. So how is self-forgiveness different than that? How do you imagine?
I feel it needs to be earned.
Ah, there it is. I knew that there's always something, right? Some box we have to check off first.
I just learned a new word.
What's that? What was it?
Pathologic altruism.
Yeah, that Roshi shared that with you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying desperately to earn my own forgiveness by doing kind of stupid stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now I'm going to ask you another question, and you got to feel the answer to this one. You can't think it. Imagine Karen here in the midst of the universe. There's the big old universe. And does the universe need anything from Karen? Is the universe making any requirements of Karen? I'd say just feel it, Karen. Just feel it. Don't think about it. What's that happening right there as you bend your head down? Oh, there. What happened with your lips? Could you feel that?
The brain says, well, that's silly. The universe doesn't need anything from anybody. It's already complete unto itself. The heart says, yeah, you got a lot to do, kid.
Uh-huh. The heart says you got a lot to do, kid?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Right now, there you go. Once more, feel the effect of that statement.
Oh, it hurts.
It hurts, yeah. Yeah, and did you hear the quality of your voice when you said it hurts? There was tenderness in it. A natural, innate tenderness that you don't have to conjure up. It just was there. It's there. It's there. Just in that swallow, right there. You just made. It's there. Right there. It's in that touch. It's there. Doesn't have any requirements of you. It's the most natural thing for you to reach out and touch your skin and attend to your hurt. Totally natural. Yeah. You feel that? Can you feel the warmth under your hand? What else is there, Karen?
It hurts.
It hurts.
Into the hurt.
Okay, so just tell me sensationally, what's it like there under your hand? Is it warm or cold? Is it trembling? Is it hard?
Tight, boxed in, hard to breathe.
Okay, tight, boxed in, hard to breathe. Good. Keep your hand there. Keep your attention there. You're doing great. Now just, is it one hard thing or is it many things?
Lot of hard things.
Okay, and physically, does it feel like pulsing or tingling or what's it like?
Being wrapped around a hot coal.
Okay, all right, good. So that tightening is really there. Okay, so feel the tightening, that fist, if you will, that's right there around your chest. Okay, and you can feel it. You can feel its grip. And now see if there's anything, any place in that grip that's has any softness to it, or isn't as tight. Let's just say isn't as tight. Is there any place in that physical experience that isn't this tight? Even if it's the tiniest place.
The, around it, there's
Yeah, or at the edges of it, maybe?
yeah.
Okay, good. So feel that edge. You're willing to sense, I'm going to say sense that edge, physically sense the edge where the tightness and that, let's call it softness, meet. That frontier, that boundary, that meeting place. And see what happens if you just recognize that meeting place for a moment. Now, we're not trying to fix anything. We're not trying to make anything go away. We're just trying to see what happens there at the meeting place.
Tightness gets smaller.
Okay, good.
I mean, it's still there, but it's
Right, it's okay. We're not trying to get rid of it. We want to know it. We want to know what happens to us when that kind of grip has us by the throat, so to speak. In your case, the chest. Yeah. So now it's softening. Now is it more workable?
oh, there's so much judgment around it.
Okay, all right. That's part of it. As soon as you notice, so there's never a state of mind that doesn't have an accompanying physical experience. Never. So if there's judgment in the mind, you can feel the grip tighten maybe.
It's almost like if I let it go, somehow I'm letting myself not finish the penance I'm supposed to be paying.
The
Really
penance.
crazy.
Penance, okay. Say 3 Hail Marys. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be facetious, but I can hear the upbringing.
I do. I love it.
You know, the upbringing is there, right? The story that I must earn this is there, and it's deep seated.
Oh, it's yeah.
Okay,
It's
good.
funny because the harder I try to earn it, the less access I have.
Okay, good. All right. So it's deep seated. There's some younger girl that's got this conditioning. Causes and conditions lead to this experience. It's okay. Now you see that. Now you know more. You're not trying to get rid of the thing. You're knowing more. You're knowing more what contributes to this particular pain. And knowing more.
You really have to look at it.
Yes, you have to look at it not in a passing glance. You have to look at it in the detail. And as you look at it in the detail, and compassion is what allows you to stay. To stay. You know, you just stay in the room when a person's hurting, don't you?
Yeah.
And here you do that. You stay. And when you stay, you begin to feel and see and experience the detail of the pain. And it starts to show itself to you. And that's where the freedom starts to emerge. The kindness, the mercy is that enables you to stay. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Beautiful. Good work, Karen. Wow. Karen, I just want to say, when Karen or someone else does that kind of willingness to explore like that, it serves us all as well. Is there someone else that has the mic? I can't see.
Actually, it's me, Frank.
Oh, who is it? Oh, it's you. Oh, good. There you are. Hi, you. I didn't see you. I just heard your voice.
Hi.
Hi. Really happy to see you.
So it is time.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's what I
just
needed.
to
Someone
let
to
you
tell me
know.
that.
But it's nice to see you, my old friend.
Thank you.
And also your words. Wounded healer. We've been really touching into that as this extraordinary group of people have relaxed into the truth of the loyalty that many of them have to their pain and our pain.
Yeah.
And also how important it is that we, as people who give care to those who are suffering, have a real relationship with the truth of our own situation and to bring that authenticity into the relationship we have with others.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you've modeled that beautifully in your life, and I want to just acknowledge that in our friendship, that I see this in you, and I learn from it. Thank you.
well, it's mutual, and I think we both enjoy continuous failure.
Yeah, but we don't want to be wounding healers, right?
Exactly. And
Right.
that is the point.
Yeah.
So we will conclude this very sensitive session with you. And I thank you all for interacting with Frank.